plan. And I would like to say to city staff, this packet was well put together.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would like to request that we actually start with Comcast, as Erin is not here yet. She's running over from basketball practice.
Okay, strike that. We will go down to item number 2. We'll come back to 1, Comcast franchise agreement.
And for this, we have the city attorney joining virtually.
Okay. Hi, Courtney. It looks like it's not allowing me to do video. That says the host has stopped it. Yeah, it's still saying it won't allow me, that the host won't allow
Bill,
me.
are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello? Let's see.
Hear him a little bit. I could hear him before.
Is he muted?
Can you hear me?
So we're temporarily in a holding zone until which time we can get the city attorney hooked up via.
We could get started with City Hall.
Let's go. Yes. So on your agenda, we're going to go to item number 3. And we do have Ms. Snodgrass here.
Oh.
So we could actually, depending on what you want to do.
There we go. Thank you, guys. I'm sorry, I was coaching.
I'd rather knock her out
Yeah, that sounds good.
so she can go home.
Perfect.
Okay. Pros plan
Okay.
to the top.
That clicker, Jess. Again. Okay. Okay. Well, good evening, you guys. Thank you for having me this evening and your patience. So I was running from a gym to here, so I apologize. This is a very rough draft that came to us from the consultants of all the work we've done within the past 7 months. Many of these elements you guys have seen before, except for the 2 new council members. Welcome. So if you have questions that you weren't here for earlier discussions, feel free to butt in and ask. I would just want to start off with a reminder that this plan is not, this is going to for sure happen. Everything in this plan would again come forth to council if it was at your guys' direction to start moving forward on a project or a new park space or a new trail or a splash pad. That direction comes from you. However, we can't move forward on those and go after funding if it's not in our long-term plan that we present to make us eligible for grants and different things to help get funding. So the real purpose is to make us eligible. There's things in here that you might go, why is that in there? Feel free to ask some of the things, especially at the end, there's like a equity or, you know, the areas of service, those things are required by us. So like, how do we really use this? It's more of a measuring tool for the state to use when we look at grant funding. Putting this together beyond you guys, we have brought forth elements of this to different groups. All 3 of our commissions, the seniors, planning, and Citizens Advisory have looked at different elements of it. Foothills Museum has looked at it, different elements, as well as our youth leadership team at the youth center has looked at the long-term planning. So there's been little inputs and little things throughout the process beyond the scope of our surveys. I'm just going to start off the top and go through it. I had a presentation, but if it's not working, we'll go through it. The first and foremost, we start off the plan with a look at my backwards. I just opened mine backwards. That would make it really awkward. A look at where we are currently at. So the plan looks at what we have as park spaces currently. As we went through, most of our park spaces right now really focus on our trail corridor. We moved in the direction of recognizing this as a parks, recreation, and trails plan for Buckley because trails were prioritized so heavily. And that's an ongoing trend we're seeing in Parks and Recreation is really highlighting that trail space as important in your community. So we included that actually in the title of the plan moving forward. We currently have 14 acres of parks, 3 indoor facilities, and 1.76 miles of paved trail. We have the different types of parks, the neighborhood parks, school facilities, private parks are all identified in this plan. And further on as we go, we'll kind of look at something and then it will come back as we look at the future planning. So this is right here is just inventory and analysis of what we currently have. And we go through the every park that's currently available. What's missing from this when I was looking through it is our very small pocket park of the community garden. So that will be added into this is a draft recommendation I'm already making to the consultants.
I have
So,
a quick
yeah.
question. You're saying the pocket park, is that the one on Mountain View Avenue?
yes,
That was never supposed to be a garden,
okay,
so it needs to go back to a public park, because the kids got no place to play now.
okay.
And they go in and play, because one person, I think, is using it a little bit.
Yeah, we have 2 registered with
Yeah,
us.
one is doing anything, and the kids go in there and play and climb on stuff they really shouldn't be climbing on, because they're gonna get hurt.
Yeah, that's great
So-
feedback.
So
We
it
haven't
should
heard
go-
that from any of the neighbors when we
Yeah.
go in and work on the garden.
Yeah.
Our request from them recently was to fix the watering because the pipe
Yeah.
was broke by some vandals,
a
but
lot
that's
of
the
little
only thing I
kids are
heard.
going in there and playing, and
Okay,
they were pretty devastated when there was things were taken.
yeah, I think that's been quite a bit too,
Yeah.
so at least I think before 2020, that's been out for a while, so. Thank you for that feedback.
You're welcome.
There's not much square footage there, so.
No, it's not,
It's
but
strictly.
they still, they don't need to be climbing on things or getting into somebody's garden area.
Yeah. So we'll go through all of, these are the city parks on this, and then there is mention of our 2 private parks inside Perkins Ferry, the Spruce and Cole, which is, and then also Spruce and Jefferson. So there's the little basketball hoop in there, and then they have that little tot lot too. So those are noted as inventory as park access in the city, but not in our service area. You'll see the White River School District property over across the highway at Wickersham is also noted because many of our residents marked that is a park they currently go to.
So just a question, is the soccer field that's down there by Copperwind, that's not listed because we're hoping to make that dog park?
And it hasn't been maintained as a soccer field in a number of years, so we didn't feel we could list it as a soccer field because it hasn't been maintained or functioned in that way. Okay. I don't want to waste you guys' time waiting on technical difficulties. So the plan then goes through and looks at all of our different park spaces that we currently have. And right off the bat, you're going to notice one of the larger proposals that we're bringing forth by recommendation of the Citizens Advisory Commission. And that is to rename the number of parks along the trail between 410 and River Heritage Park Corridor or Heritage Park. And bring the sections into one cohesive identity and then subset their names. I have a graphic on here showing what that would look like in a sign. And first and foremost, we want to make sure that we still honor the Vanderhoof name, and that area would stay Vanderhoof Memorial Garden. And we would spruce it up as a identity of it is a more formal garden that is highly cared for, and try to bring up that element and then revive those memorials that are in there. And you'll see in our work plan towards the end, there's a lot of mention of the steps that need to be done to inventory those. There's a lot of man hours that really need to go into maintaining those. Many are 30 to 40 years old. And we have a lot, I would say that's probably the number one random thing that people, I'll be on the trail and somebody will flag me down to ask about them. Sometimes it's they want it fixed, sometimes like, what's the history of this? I know some of them, but not all of them. So there are a lot of names in there. We want to make sure they get honored. We also want to bring them together so people can actually find them, because some have been kind of hidden.
In the pros plan, remember, there was some we were gonna work on an ordinance. So we had to identify, because people always wanted to plant memorials just
Yes.
all over the place. Did we ever do that?
No, that is in our action items and it's on the work plan for the Citizens Advisory Commission
Okay.
going into this year. And that is where this conversation with naming the giant section as one and then subbing it. So that if they came out with a naming policy right away, you guys they weren't bringing forth 5 or 6, 7 names all after a park that were all similar addresses, but all kind of the same spaces because they all flow together. If you think of, we were talking, the fair kind of has gate zones. It's the giant fair property, but there's gate zones. Or if you're looking at Metro Parks Tacoma along the waterfront, that's one giant waterfront park, but it does have name zones within it to help identify reservations or areas people might want to participate.
So I saw in when you're talking about the memorials and the plaques, I know that would be kind of a pain as far as maintenance goes.
Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe like what the Veterans Wall has, put them on a wall instead so that it's upright and you don't have to weed around them, you don't have to mow around them, something like that.
Yes, 100%. We want to get them all to one zone too. Whether they get moved to a wall or get moved together, larger chunks of granite that can hold more plaques. You're exactly right, so that they're not all hazards for mowers to hit and someone having to weave in and out of everyone. And some have gotten lost. I have people come, I know there's one under here, and they want to bring out a metal detector and find it because it probably is under there. The main Christmas tree has a plaque under it that we haven't been able to find, but the family knows it's there. So it's probably under pine needles of year, right? So, yeah, and the wind comes up and it gets hidden again, so. Is there any more? We can talk more about Heritage Park. There's more references to it throughout, so. This goes through kind of keeping those zones, the Veterans Memorial, and we can get into the ins and outs of the naming. The names in this plan right now are really kind of, well, they are what we heard back from people that they call them. The totem area or the Main Street Park on the corner, they all have these names that locals call them, but what are they really to someone who might be coming into town for an event? We want to make sure that it's clear to someone from the outside as well. Going through, you'll see the Youth Center, Main Street, and on every one, I'll stop at the Mayor's Fountain area, is an opportunity for improvement. So we already have on our work plan as a high priority this year is to move those plaques. We've already upgraded the fountain into the planter and it's doing great. The plants are thriving, to get those plaques off the front and move to the trail side so that they're actually visible and we can actually honor past mayors of the city. So you'll see on every one of these parks, there's additional improvements on the horizon.
And you mentioned addresses that'll kind of come along with this, that
Correct.
it'll be tied in if
So
you want to
this-
have an event somewhere.
Yeah, when we look at emergency or calling for locates or some of these things that happen, the parks don't all currently have addresses. So if we have one giant area and then we really identify them, put them out with signs, we'll have addresses on that sign. So if there's an emergency and a kid goes down, there's a sign right there at the address. Yeah, people ping their phones now and things, but still knowing where people are is important. There's some typos on the names too. Rough draft. We'll take anything you see. It continues to highlight the importance of the Foothills Trail in Buckley and then its impact as we look at the analysis on the greater region. And we included this just to bring in the draw that Buckley can be with the trail. And you'll see that we become this last extension, or we are this last extension of Pierce County, especially with the bridge opening. Mine's all flipped around for some reason.
Let's do
Yeah.
every which way.
Correct. The level of service
we looked at, we took levels of service standards per 1,000 residents. We've talked about this before with you guys. And so we included the maps that showed that goal of having a park within a half-mile buffer around homes in Buckley. And so you'll see that. And then the impact of 410 on access. This is highlighted because in the long term, if we did want to go after an acquisition grant, we want it brought up repeatedly that concern of 410 being a barrier for kids to access a safe place to play is a priority and important for anyone glancing through the plan to see.
Question on the access
Yeah.
part. It says that it's a B rating, what we have now.
Mhm.
Is the proposal, would that give us an A plus?
It
We're
would,
looking at
it would greatly move us up. Yeah.
Okay,
And I believe the development of Miller Park will also get us very close.
gotcha, yeah.
And they are actually currently looking at changing some of the ways that they determine access with
Okay.
more transportation impacts, because that's even a bigger issue for larger cities. So we want to make sure we keep that side of the highway in mind.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Moving on to goals, policy and action items. This is where Kenny, you mentioned wanting to know about the policies and things. We have 6 main goals based on this plan that then works out into policy and action items that council can choose to move forward with on later. There's some that just reference design or things to prioritize, and then there's others that link into full development of parks, creating code, zoning for helping with commerce in parks, further developing things out into goal, policy, and then action items. Trying to see where that exact one is. One that came up from the senior commission was more benches at intervals to provide rest for older users on the trail. So you see that if you're wondering where that came from, that was from them. Another one that came up, we've heard a lot about just having recreation, cultural, but also engaging in local commerce to bring people to town with our parks. And activating the empty parcel that the city owns for food trucks and making food trucks and vending in parks more sustainable between the post office and the old liquor store. We could, if you could
Okay.
put food trucks right in
Yeah,
there,
okay.
just another spot we could access
Okay.
all along the trail.
Would that just be food trucks on special occasions or weekends?
Yeah, it could be, options are endless. But right now, we don't have the policy and infrastructure to do it, so.
And like Napa in Enumclaw where they have.
Yeah, they have a food truck all the time.
Corner all the time.
And for the summer, if it was a food truck along the trail, like in South Prairie, those stands that are right along the trail become stopping points. People will ride their bikes just to go there. Wally's functions as that as well, but another vendor, like when we had the bikes as well, that was a great opportunity for the trail to bring in some commerce to town and give people a reason to get out.
When I see that Mama's Tacos,
Mm-hmm.
parking lot, yes.
Excuse me. Moving on, the more of just the goals, policy and action items, we see the big spread. You guys have seen this graphic before of kind of envisioning the trail as a destination. So the Heritage Park Visionary Map. And then that moves on to kind of the zoning of kind of just the thought process of what types of activities would happen, the youth center zone being really focused on high action youth activities and events. You have kind of a gathering area with the trailhead and the Dock Paint Pavilion and the Veterans Memorial where people can gather and celebrate. And then you have kind of the Civic Green area where you're having the kind of you have the Main Street totem pole area and then into the gardens of Vanderhoof. And then the museum grounds, I'm sorry, the Civic Green is the Mayor's Fountain, the library's there, the post office, that is kind of all your civic services. While those aren't all operated by us, they all kind of relate. And the partnerships with the library can cultivate traffic and users in recreation. And then we have the gateway to downtown and linking the commerce and other activities and events. Prime example is when the log show happens, that's where the street fair is, right? So linking that into the downtown through the Buckley Hall zone and the museum grounds.
You know, you talk about all the bicyclists and that.
Mhm.
But the problem being, you know, most bicyclists aren't like our old bikes where we had to kickstand and you can put them up. We have no bike racks.
I agree.
I mean, if you're gonna want people to stop, we need bike racks and benches and
I agree.
all that, especially down there on, you know, river.
Yeah. I agree.
Quick question, Main Street Park.
Yeah.
I believe that is what has been commonly referred to as Thunderbird Park
Yep, Thunderbird or Totem.
or Totem Park. So with that,
Mhm.
there's been conversation over past couple years,
Mhm.
and I brought it up several times about the status of the totem
Yep.
pole that is there. And that my opinion, and I would imagine everybody would agree that it needs to be culturally appropriate. Are there any plans to partner with either the Puyallup, the Muckleshoot, or
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Ron. We have actually secured a donation for a new cedar that's actually grown in Buckley for another piece of art. And have slowly been turning it over to Tribal Connections and have a list of contacts and been gaining them. The timeline and process for that type of partnership can be very slow because it's not our decision to make. And so it has started. I struggle to put a timeline on it for people because when I talk to my cohorts in other cities, it's not really our decision on what to put there if we're going to do it correctly. And we want to be very thoughtful about how we go into the relationship and partnership.
makes perfect sense. Thank you very much.
And we do have the cedar donation, which is awesome.
So I have another question.
Yeah.
I apologize for.
No,
asking all these
ask
questions,
away.
but, so there has been talk about that
Mhm.
totem pole. And do we know, I mean, I understand that it was done by a Buckley resident.
It was paid for by a Buckley resident, to my understanding, but it was done by a shop teacher from Tacoma.
Okay.
Is the background I received.
So it's not actually authentic
Correct.
native.
Correct.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about when we go to replace it, what to do with it. I mean, I wouldn't want.
Yeah, we
to-
would. I think the first thing we would do is ask the Foothills Historical Society if they would like it.
Okay.
I think that would be the first thing because it's been in Buckley for so much and a lot of people have an attachment to
Yeah.
it as just a local piece of art. And we would probably start there.
Okay.
Our hope is that it can stand as long as we can. We've been fixing rocks as we go, but there's going to become a time where the cedar itself is getting close to the end of its life.
Just, want to hurt anyone's feelings or, oh, we're gonna burn it or,
No.
something like that. So it's like, you kind of have to be a little.
Correct. Someone did explain to me, and I don't know if this is true, that if it was a true like left one, it would actually be treated like a tree and you leave it until it falls over and it's like an act of God if it did fall and, our liability wouldn't be there. But since it's not,
Okay.
we do have liability around it.
Would be kind of nice to be able to keep it though with
Yeah,
the
and
museum.
yeah, and they could keep it indoors out of the weather. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else before I keep moving forward? Keep the questions coming and interrupt at any time. The next one looks at a bigger city view of trail paths and pathways. You might have to get your magnifying glasses out to look. It has the dark green of the Foothills Trail. It shows existing sidewalks, not all, but looking at a large loop. Many of our public comments, and we hear regularly, is that they would love a way to go around Rainier School safely, either walking or on their bike or with their kids. And so this maps current existing sidewalks. And then the blue dash has planned sidewalks or trails. And then green dash is recommended trails. So there's an extension past Perkins and then around through Levesque. That would be recommended, but there already is in the comp plan for more planned sidewalks out to Shea Estates. So eventually completing that loop. And then also there's some sidewalk completions that need to happen through town and down the middle, down Jefferson and then out so that you would actually have a safe walking path all the way through the Miller Park zone and through Rose Place as well, just to increase the walkability on that side of town. When we look at the other side of town, the new apartment complex had that little trail or townhomes trail put out. We own the property behind, next to the flume. So there is a chance to develop, to make a little walking trail loop over there for families as well. Off park and then looped through. So that is marked as well, showing sidewalks and then proposed trail based on what's already there.
Are these gonna be paved trails?
The
hopefully?
ones around Raiders, all of the ones that connect to streets would be paved, either bike paths or trails. The ones where you see next to the river, which I should mention, those would be more the nature trails where it would be just like a dirt trail. Yeah. And again, all of these things would come forth to you guys when we're going after funding over certain amounts and when we're looking at development. These are just the dreams and hopes that our citizens have brought to us. You guys have shared, putting them into action and looking at what other cities are doing to make this a great place to live, a community people are really happy to be in. Looking at the capital improvement plan, this currently is in you'll see the priority levels listed. It's also, would love to hear your guys's feedback on priority levels. Our number one thing we have is the phase 1 of Miller Park, and this will be something you guys hear a lot about in the next 6 to 8 months as we go after multiple grants, one federal and state, and really go into the nitty gritty on getting those out and what that property can look like for the town. You'll also see in this, we have the Heritage Park corridor splash pad, a stage, a White River Park, which is basically like a riverfront park. Maybe it would be called that, maybe it wouldn't, that would come through to you guys. And if you flip through, they did a very nice graphic on what that could potentially look like with the space that's already been cleared down by the river. To just provide some river viewing and nature space and kind of a quiet area that there's nothing like that on the Enumclaw side either. I think the White River is kind of a river that people don't get to watch the water go by. So that could be a really unique parcel or addition to our park system. You'll see on there the kind of low hanging fruit of making the dog park out of the mentioned old soccer field. That's listed at 55,000. I actually think that would be a lot cheaper than that for us right now. With the fencing and signage is really all we would have to do. You'll see a skate park renovation on there. And I want to bring this up because we're looking at, this plan for 6 to 10 years, and eventually the wear and tear on the skate park's going to be there. So we wanted to make sure to have that in the plan so that we're preparing for the day where we're starting to get a crack or two. And it's looking like we do need to do some safety repairs and, kind of major maintenance, I would say.
There's not major maintenance now.
Not now.
Okay, that's my
We're
big question.
planning-
Why is that low?
We're planning knowing the lifespan of those kind of structures and the wear and tear. This year, we're actually going to have a firm come out and just give us kind of a life check and just structure check on it. There's a couple wear and tear items. There's little things we can do here and there to always improve it. But at some point, if we want that to be as successful as it is now in the long term, it will eventually need a hug.
Yeah, so the $60,000 then is like anticipating future needs that maybe you're about $60,000
Yeah.
to do whatever it needs to keep it safe.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, these are just estimated right now. By the time we got there, everything would come forth to you guys and what we wanted to. Having it in here also. Skates are one of those niche opportunities where there's unique grants for it too, especially with how busy ours is. So
Erin, how were the priority levels established in the first place?
Yeah,
how was that done?
well, Miller Park was from you guys.
Right,
It's been
right.
prioritized. The Vanderhoof Memorial Garden was based on feedback in both of our surveys and that we hear. And so we kind of just took what we've been hearing. And I'm open to more feedback from you guys on what should be prioritized and what shouldn't. And again, this is a larger planning document. You guys set the direction for where it would go year to year.
On the Collins Road and VHS land trail, are you talking about going through DHS property?
The trail itself wouldn't be on the DSHS, but the access road would be through their property. There's no other way to get through it. But we own a chunk out on the point,
Yeah,
and that's where we would hope to have a trail for people to access.
that could be a problem good old state decide they want it back. Then we'd be landlocked or something we won't be able to use.
Yeah, possibly. But again, we hope that that wouldn't happen. It's a very long lease and then we would have maybe an
Long
access
lease,
road.
but they
Yeah.
can Say, we're done with a certain amount of notice.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where all of the kind of right of ways are to through and
So
out the
maybe we wanna
property,
Look at.
the right of ways.
Right away to make sure that we're never gonna get cut off and 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and all of a sudden.
Yeah. And I
It's
believe
not
right now
available.
we're good on that through.
It's a 45-year lease.
Right, but they can say at any time. We're done.
Would it be using the existing driveways that are in there or? I know that maybe if the fence was moved on the far west side of the property, you know, along that big ditch.
Yeah, I think it's open to all sorts of looks at to make the right decision for the neighborhoods and people that live around there and for the best access to build a low-cost trail. One of the positives about this type of nature trail is the partnerships we can do to really put in something for people to enjoy nature at a low cost to us through trail organizations and Boy Scouts. So we would want to do some studies and some outreach to decide what the best access is. And again, look at those points of where the right of ways are and utility lines.
Is the $450,000 estimate for that, does that take into consideration those partnerships with other groups, or is that kind of like pretending that those don't exist?
I think it's pretending those don't exist.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that number's pretty high.
Yeah, because originally when we
said-
talked about it,
Yeah.
the whole point was that.
Yeah,
we
I
could
think it-
easy, low cost,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's too
Yeah.
high. Again, rough draft.
We gotta remember that we have to have a plan in
Yeah.
order to get a
Mhm.
formalized plan in order to apply for some of these grants.
Yeah.
And anything at all, any city funds or any project has to be approved by this body.
Again.
I mean, you gotta have a plan.
Yep. I'm gonna go ahead a few pages. I mentioned the White River Park and you'll see that beautiful kind of photo simulation they did with the access. We talked a little bit about before, and I know, I forget which one of you had asked me just homeless prevention on that. So I want to know that I'm still waiting from an answer from King County about if there's any homeless prevention tactics going into that bridge structure right now, and I'll let you guys know. Otherwise, we'll be looking at what we can do on our side once it's turned over to us.
Is, and that'll probably facilitate the conversation. Pierce County's gonna have to do, since we don't own that. You know, whatever Pierce County or King County does, maybe we can match it on this side so we don't have.
Correct. And
to
if you go
focus.
down there right now, there is a lot of land and bridge overlay. And so I've had a couple community members ask me to kind of there's just that fear setting in, I think, and we don't know, we might not have any problems at all. But I think because you see it on TV and you know it's happening in the larger cities, I'd rather be prepared than responding 5 years down the road. The Vanderhoof Memory Park on page 57 is a prime picture of what we're dealing with over there. And I think there is, you'll see the catalog, creating system, designing, and then implementing it is kind of this large overhead goal and something that the Citizens Advisory Commission will be looking at. No matter what happens with that space, they'll be looking at what to do with those memorials. The musical mile is an art kind of, it is a way to bring another element of art just to get people active and walking by providing musical instruments along the trail for people to interact with. So it's just another mention of another way to keep people engaged in the trail who might not just want to shoot hoops. Park north of 410, we talked about a little bit with Wickersham. We go over again those 3 identified spots. And potentially, as we bring up the access issue, we would see more and more of that if lots came for sale that we wanted to go after. Again, at your guys' direction.
And that, the large number 1 shaded spot is that section that the siding.
Yeah, we currently already own those, and those aren't prioritized. That's just 3 locations, just so you guys know. We are keeping kind of just a check on that PSE parcel just to know when it is going to be decommissioned and what that looks like. Because while it's tiny, it could be something reasonable.
Oh, that little one right here.
Yeah.
Number 3. Okay.
And then as you get further on, one of the larger projects in the capital improvement is not necessarily, that's not park space or developing or any of the actual spaces, but it's actually our signage and branding throughout all the spaces, making sure that we have a cohesive look, that it's clear where people are. Park hours are visible and that rules are consistent throughout the park so people know which ones are ours. And you'll see if the presentation was working, I made a little mock of what the signs could look at for you guys with the underscore showing the subset. So if we link this out, we can email it so you guys can see it. And it just brings the branding together. With that, the branding of and wayfinding throughout all of the trail system and the parks is something that's on the citizens advisories, like high priority list, and something that the county is interested in helping us fund. Moving into capital improvement list of our indoor facilities. There's a few things missing from this list that I need to bring back up and have added, including some ADA things in other buildings. But it's just a capital indoor facility. RCO doesn't pay for anything with it, roof and 4 walls. They'll pay for a picnic shelter, but not if it's closed in and heated. So this is in there just to provide, these are places that people might have recreation or where we might have a meeting and there's still the cities, and we want to make sure it's representative so it relates well to the larger comp plan that we'll be moving forward with later this year. Any questions, topics, things you want to go over again, things you want to bring up, suggestions? I am here for you guys. Thank you for understanding that I didn't have my presentation.
Councilmember Green.
Just the only thing, for that the trail, the SHS land.
Yeah.
After we see like what the numbers could look like,
Mhm.
maybe we can reconsider moving low to medium, if it makes sense.
Yep.
Anybody else? I would like to say this is very well put together. I had an opportunity over the past few days to go over this, a lot of information in there. Well done. City administrator, do we have the city attorney?
No.
Let's
Thank you, Erin.
talk about
So-
Comcast.
Can you hear me out there? Can't hear me?
Technological advances aren't always advanced. Apologies, everyone. Stone Ages.
Hey, Courtney.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. Yeah, I'm visible online.
Yes, I have you on speakerphone so the council can.
Here.
Okay, we'll try that. I will be there in person next Tuesday, so next week there'll be no technical problems. Just mental ones maybe, but not technical. So all right, on the Comcast franchise, fortunately there isn't a lot that we need to talk about because it's pretty straightforward, I think, this time around. I think when you deal with the the franchise renewals, you kind of deal with it at two levels. Only one I think is really important to the council, and that's whether or not your cable franchise company is doing a good job for the community. For communities that are dealing with small cable television companies that are struggling a little bit to provide good service, that's a time to hold a public hearing and invite the public over to provide input on whether or not they're getting enough channels and the customer service is good enough, the signals are good enough, that kind of thing. Buckley is fortunate enough, you've got Comcast, which is, my understanding, I think is the biggest multinational media company in the world. Their service packages have to survive the scrutiny of hundreds of counties and cities throughout the country. So, if they have any brains, and they certainly do, they're pretty good at putting together a package that is going to satisfy people. You as council members can't specify that you want a particular channel, but you can basically say, you need more channels or more, certain types of channels, news channels or whatever. If you think, that's not good enough, and clearly if there's some customer service problems and they're not tending to the needs of the community, all those issues can be addressed as well. But in my review, I haven't heard any complaints, and it doesn't look like that's a major issue. So really dealing with it, this franchise at this point has been dealing at the kind of the nuts and bolts to make sure that the franchise terms are make it easy for the city to regulate and take care of the facilities that are put into city streets. You may have seen basically that we're only down to a couple revisions to the franchise ordinance. One deals with tree trimming. I know in some communities, tree trimming is a big deal. Like I mentioned in my memo, the city of Edmonds, they have an arborist basically that looks over anything that a utility provider does to trees to make sure that the street trees are kept nice and in good shape. I mean, currently that's not an issue in Buckley, but it could be down the line. So I just wanted to make sure that if the city did adopt ordinances at some point that regulated that Comcast would agree to be bound by them. Comcast is hemming and hawing, so hopefully, by next Tuesday, we'll get a resolution of that issue. The other one was simply how to deal with emergency repairs. If suddenly we find we have a bunch of exposed wiring or something that's a fire hazard, the way that the franchise is set up that Comcast had put together was that they're the only ones that get to make the repairs. But I felt that, if it's an emergency situation, we should be able to get in there and do something about it. So what we finally agreed upon, because apparently, some of the Comcast facilities involve some sensitive fiber optic cables, that kind of thing. They were afraid the city might damage that in case of emergency. So they provided us with some kind of an emergency contact number that we call if we have an issue with that. I mean, I did go through several rounds on negotiating the terms here and ended up not changing a whole lot. What happened was kind of like 3/4 of the way through our negotiations, Comcast finally identified, but we've already agreed to all these terms with all your surrounding cities. Why can't you be the same as everybody else? And it's like, well, it would have been nice to know that up front. I mean, I knew that Wilkinson had, that they were using Wilkinson's agreement, but it was also Pierce County and several other communities. And so what I did was I just checked the other agreements, Pierce County specifically, to see if that was indeed the case, that the terms they were presenting to the city of Buckley were the same as for Pierce County, the people living right outside city limits, and they are. So because of that, I basically, there wasn't anything major I felt that really needed to be changed to help out the city there. I had been basing my negotiations on some model language from the League of Oregon Cities. The state of Washington didn't do something like that, but Oregon cities had put together model language for franchises, and it gave some good ideas on how to make the franchise better for the city. But they were just, a matter of small degree improvements, nothing significant. So like I said, once I found out that Comcast was treating Buckley the same as surrounding communities, the language didn't look too bad overall. And so that's why, for my work on it, I'm recommending the council approve it.
Any questions for city attorney regarding this Comcast agreement? I mean, Comcast is huge. I've had DirecTV. I've had all this. Comcast provides what you want at what level you want to pay at. They provide you the moon if you want to pay for it. I mean, everybody here has access to all that. It depends on what your budget or what your taste is. Councilmember Green.
Was there any discussion about why they decided to no longer endeavor to continue their voluntary initiative to offer discount to those individuals age 62 or older or handicapped?
No, I think, no, I mean, that, that was just something they volunteered back in 2008. They're not obligated to do something like that. It's, if that's something important to the council, I can ask that they, see if they can do it again. But they're, like I said, they don't want to change anything in their, model franchise, because then everyone else would ask for the same thing. So it's pretty tough to get them to budge on anything, but I can certainly get some input from them on why that changed for them next week.
Yeah, I'd like to know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Anybody else? Thank you, city attorney.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Phil.
Moving on to City Hall project, for 5 of us. We're familiar, 4, 5, familiar with what has gone on since October 2022. We have 2 new members. Both used to be frequent attendees as citizens. However, they may have questions. So, city administrator.
Yes, I can start by just providing a quick Cliff Notes version of the last year of where we've taken this and where we are now. So originally, the council had planned to do 1 addition at the existing city hall. The budget for that was just over 1.5 million. We put that out to bid last spring, did a bid opening, and it came in pretty significantly over budget. At that time, staff recommended that we reconsider the design to also include an office space for planning and building, so that all of the primary city services that are interfacing with customers would be located under one roof. So when we started to look at that alternative and looked at the cost, it generated this discussion, and ultimately council's talked about 4 alternatives, which are identified on page 2 of the memo. The first was expanding the original design to have that 2nd edition. The second was to rebuild the city hall at this location, the MPC. The third was to purchase a new building currently under construction. And the 4th was to build an entirely new city hall. Those options are very generally compared in the first attachment of the packet. As part of the 2024 budget, council approved $2.6+ million for the design and construction of City Hall at the current location, which would fund the project at the current location. These dollars are identified in our REIT 307 fund, but that money is a combination of interest revenue, REIT carryover funds, $200,000 of new REIT dollars from this year, and a 12.74 cost allocation, which is spread from street, storm, and water capital facilities, the utilities for the project. So prior to this meeting, I did receive some concerns regarding the proposal and if it would accommodate our staffing needs. So I took a look at some comparable cities to see what their staffing levels are in order to evaluate if we would have adequate space.
What would the square footage be?
The square footage of the new, so our current square footage is 1,907 square feet, and our new square footage for the 2 additions would be 3,826 square feet. And it would include, just for stats, right now we have 1 bathroom and 9 staff working out of what would be considered 7 workspaces. And then in addition to the square footage, it would add 2 additional restrooms, 2 storage rooms, a dedicated IT space, and a conference room. So with that, you can see what I did was I just looked at population counts for what is our assumed build out. And so we're assumed to be between 8,500 and 10,000 today. That's subject to change when we're talking about 10, 20 years in GMA down the road. So looking at a range of 10 to 13,000 population and the amount of staff in the departments that we are looking to house under the new city hall. And these again are our frontward facing clerical staff, our utility billing, our planning and building, our clerk, anyone who would receive payments. And so looking at that from what we have today and what these other comparable jurisdictions have, I do feel pretty confident that this 2nd edition would accommodate the staff that we would need as we grow. Right now, with the floor plan, which is shown towards the very end of your packet. It's the last 3 pages blown up, but if you look a few ahead of that, you can see it all under one. You can see on the floor plan, we would comfortably sit 14 to 17 individuals, and if we squeezed a bit, we could fit 19. So again, knowing that, I do believe that we would be able to accommodate all future admin functions to future build out. So last summer, there were also some concerns with the look of the design, and hearing those, our design team did put together some design elevations, which were included in your packet as attachment 2. And I also have on the PowerPoint, but it's not working today. So the first design shows the existing roof line. It shows option A here. The existing roof line, the existing entryway. This was previously called potentially a house with wings. And so this would be the most budget-friendly alternative. But if you turn to option B or option C, option B would be the second most cost-effective because it doesn't alter the roof line. It does add a bit more of an entryway, so that it would give a bit more of a prominent frontward appearance. And then option C is completely amending the roof line in order to create a formal entryway coming into City Hall. So we just wanted to show that there are some options and alternatives. Option C, which is my personal favorite, is of course the most expensive. They're estimating that would be upwards of close to $400,000 in order to do that complete redesign and remodulation of the roof. So the more budget-friendly would be option B or certainly option A, but it is something that we could look at as having a bid alternative. Right now, bids are looking pretty positive for cities and projects. Projects are coming in under bid often. And so if we were to do a bid alternate and there was cost savings, it would be something that we could decide at that time if we wanted to spend the additional money for a bit more of a fancy entryway.
When you say 400,000, is that to do the design?
That's for the actual construction of the revised entryway
400,000
to construct it. So compared,
the entry.
compared to option A, which is the base design right now, which doesn't really have any improvements. We do have a revision to the ramp and the stairway. Option C, which is the one that completely redoes the roof line. They just general rough math, not a formal estimate. They said it would be probably close to $400,000. Because they'd have to redo that entire roof line versus option B would be less than that, but I don't have a number for you this evening. I certainly get that.
Courtney, what's that white thing in option B at the front? That looks weird.
The greenhouse,
What is it?
Like an
It looks like a green.
I was
but what
being
is it?
facetious.
atrium.
It's weird. It's
Yeah,
weird.
it's, I think that what they were trying to say is that they could do some type of a different attractive architecture or decorative design in the front entryway, keeping the existing roof line. I could see
Right.
that instead being something that was inciting and maybe a large clock or something that
Yeah.
just
Gotcha.
adds some modulation so that it doesn't have just that flat entryway.
So it doesn't have to be that exact.
No,
That's
this was
weird.
crafted at the 11th hour by our great architects, who just wanted to show you that
Okay.
there are some
Okay.
options for us to redesign that, so it doesn't look like a house with wings.
So that's a good break point here for questions on that. And again, this option 1 to expand the footprint of the existing city hall, adding the space to building and planning and everybody have a space to work, is in the 24 budget. We just had 3 options there that were shown, one of which would cost roughly $400,000 more. Questions on any of that? Moving on.
Okay. I've heard one additional concern that I'll address tonight, which is the costs and the funding portion from the utilities funds, specifically the amount that they are estimated to be contributing, which has been shown in earlier financing plans. But the way that it was depicted on the graph made it look like it was all REIT dollars. And I do want to clarify that it is definitely a proportionate share from those funds as well. 405, 406, and 408. So, and the reason for that is based off of our indirect cost allocation plan, which estimated 12.74% of administrative costs for the different funds for the services that the admin functions provide for those utilities. For example, payroll, accounts payable, utility billing is actually now housed at a city hall. So just for example. So with that, I looked at those ending fund balances, which were included in the 2024 budget. So you can see in the different funds, after the cost allocation is made pursuant to the cost allocation plan for the funding of City Hall, those funds do have significant ending fund balances at the end of 2024. And I also listed the other projects that we have budgeted. We have Miller Park, Foothills Trail, Youth Center, MPC doors replacement, and Bedlow Street extension. And then we have some pretty significant expenses that are anticipated to come out of the 405, 406, and 408 accounts. And one is a vac truck, which we've been planning for a couple of years. And the other is a street sweeper, which we are now planning for. And so with the combined total of those, it's about $1 million that would be spread between those 405, 406, and 408 funds, a little heavier on the 408 fund side because they do both support the stormwater system.
So are these ending balances after money is taken out?
After what was already budgeted to be moved into the 007 account or the 307 account to pay for the city hall. So this is the ending fund balance after those, that 12.74% of the total project cost is factored over.
So what did we begin with, like, in the 408? You're showing an ending balance, but what did we start with?
It's about $325,000 per utility for City Hall specifically, but there's other things that are funded out of those funds. For example, our capital improvement projects for the different throughout the city.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. So in 405, the sewer construction fund, 2024 begins with 720,500 and ends with 784,000. So it goes, the fund balance actually goes up. 406 water construction starts at just a little over 709,000 and ends with 357,000. And then in 408, it begins at 2,081,000 and ends at about 1.8 million. So it goes down about 200,000. And there is water there. That does include the fact that 405, 406, and 408, the water, sewer, and storm have their own projects budgeted for the year, not just the transfer for the City Hall project. They have their own projects. So any fund balances that go down would be accounted for because of that as well.
So like just to try and understand, so the 357 for like water construction, that counts the main street where they're gonna redo the water main as part of the plan?
I believe
Or will it be plus
so.
that?
No, the 357 accounts for the transfer and any projects planned
Oh,
already.
okay.
Yep, that's
all.
the ending balance after everything's budgeted.
Any other expenses like the street sweeper that,
We have not budgeted for
Okay,
that
that's
yet.
not- that's
That
not
would be,
included.
yep, that would be an
Okay.
additional cost. And we,
Okay.
for the vac truck specifically, we were expecting to look at that starting this year for a purchase in 2025 or 2026. The street sweeper is a more emergent issue. And
Yeah.
so we're exploring our options on that and we'll be bringing that forward soon.
We're also looking to see, we have a stormwater grant that we receive every year from Department of Ecology. Usually it's anywhere from 50 to 75,000, but I believe it's closer to 125 or 130,000 this year. And so Chris is checking into whether any of that could have been used either for the vac truck and or now for the street sweeper as well, as stormwater can pay for street sweeping and does pay for a lot of the street sweeping expenses because it keeps the storm drains clean and that kind of thing. So we're looking to see if that grant can be used for equipment as well.
So I understand there's certain funds for certain things. So it's okay to use money from the 405, 406, and 408 for a capital project.
Those
Yes.
funds are specifically for capital projects or utility capital projects and also then could be used to fund the share of an administration building or a general capital project that then supports those utilities.
Okay.
For instance, you're on the right track, Denise, that there are enterprise funds and that money comes from an enterprise. But City Hall supports, whether it's IT, payroll, HR, that, and so just last year, they broke that out in the 12 point.
The 12.74 is the
Yeah.
overall city indirect cost rate that we would use to show as an indirect cost that all the indirect services, accounts payable, basically finance, administration, IT, city attorney, city administration, all of those indirect services that support all the other operational functions, comes out to an average citywide rate of 12.74% overhead rate. And that was where the 350 some thousand came from for each of the utilities that got budgeted.
Does the fire department and police department have to pay share of that too, or since they have their own buildings, do they not?
They don't, only because they're in the general fund already, so they would be the general fund paying the general fund.
Got it. Okay.
So-
And yeah, we have to be very careful with the enterprise money, but this is
Has to be.
a financially responsible way to help them pay for the service that they provide.
The enterprises are
provide.
treated more as an individual business, you could say, for each one. So water and sewer and storm all have to account for their full cost of operations, which includes then paying for the services that indirect service
That the
departments
admin
pay.
part.
Admin of them, yeah, pays, because they don't have their own administration and their own finance. They pay for the general.
Okay. They don't have their own billing department or
Right.
whatever.
Utility billing is actually housed out of City Hall.
Oh, I thought it was down at the city.
They
shop.
moved earlier this last year. Yeah. And under finance.
You moved them even though you didn't have room in your own building.
Well,
Maybe.
at that point in time, we thought we were remodeling the building. And we also had an individual leave for medical leave. They're returning next month. They will be taking up space in our conference room. And so we're trying to do the best with what we have, but ultimately in other cities, that utility billing function is part of finance. And so we did find the ability to have some overlap and create some continuity of operations by having them come down. And instead, we hired a management analyst in place of some of the functions that utility billing and the clerical functions that position used to perform to help Director Banks.
Sorry, keep asking questions.
No, okay.
Does the department heads know that the money that will be coming from their appropriate funds know that the money's coming from their appropriate funds?
Yes.
Okay.
How are we gonna look? I mean, right now, we're what, $455,000 in the red? And, you know, I've read in here where you're gonna take a little from here and a little from there to get it fixed. How are we gonna look at the end of this year? Are we gonna end up with 25 being, 'cause I know in 22 we were in the hole. 23 we were, and we bounced it to 24.
Mhm.
Now we're gonna have to bounce 24 to 25.
We will continue to have, if you're referring to the general fund, we will continue to have a deficit in the general fund. These dollars are completely separate from general fund dollars and cannot be used for general fund purposes. So those are, although they're both very relevant issues, they don't directly impact one another. So we will be looking for ways to increase revenue into the general fund, which is the $455,000 and growing deficit. We did get it down this last year, but ultimately we are going to have to explore options to increase revenue or decrease costs. That being said, we have dollars that are available for capital projects that can't be used for general operating expenses, which is that general fund. And so spending these dollars doesn't take away from our ability or improve our ability to correct the deficit in the general fund.
And just go ahead.
I was gonna say, that said, there are two alternative options if we do have some reservations about using utility dollars. The likelihood of this project being completed in 2024 at this juncture, we're in January, is pretty unlikely. Likely that it goes into 2025, even if it was approved at the next meeting, by the time we actually get it out to bid and the contractor starts and the work is completed, it'll be 2025. So that said, we will receive additional REIT dollars in 2025 that we could allocate towards City Hall to decrease the contribution from the utilities. Or we could look at using the cumulative reserve dollars. Those are just two options right away. That was something that was brought up last year. We had discussed the need to kind of pushed the brakes a little bit while we discussed the deficit and the fact that the cumulative reserve can be used for general fund costs. What this proposal does is it gives us an avenue to fund the project without needing to use the cumulative reserve. But knowing that we're going into 2025 and assuming that this project was approved and it went that far, we would be recommending in 2025 to reallocate some future REIT dollars in 2025 towards the project. So this is the worst case scenario, if you will, from the utilities, from a contribution standpoint.
So why don't we just wait till we have the extra?
Because costs are continuing to go up. And so right now it's a pretty positive bid market.
Yeah.
We've also outgrown our space. And so the other alternatives, and that's certainly a policy direction that the council can give, but we would be coming to you and asking if potentially we should get a portable, or what would be some alternatives for us to get some additional space for the individuals in that building. We've discussed how we could maybe repurpose parts of the MPC, but then that impacts the senior center, and what we can do in a shorter term if we did decide to go with one of the longer term scenarios, which would be building a new building.
So are the plans that we have right now, are those good for a while? Or, I mean, do they expire? I don't.
We have done the full plan for the first edition, and the land use plans for that are good for 3 years. Permitting is done. For the second edition, we need approval from council to get those design documents done, and then they would also be good for 3 years. So if we went out to bid and bids again were high, we would have 3 years to potentially rebid the project until it came under.
So what would be coming forward to you keep saying the next meeting, what's gonna be coming forward on?
An authorization for the approval of the design for the full build out of City Hall, the 3,800 square foot build out, in order to accommodate both all of the admin offices, so
Okay.
both additions.
Don't know if we're gonna do that in addition or brand new building.
So right now, we would love to just have some discussion and direction from council. If you would like for us to look at the addition, the second edition, and I refrain from calling it that just because I think the concept behind the first edition, it's not a good use of money. I wouldn't recommend it. And so I'm going to refer to the edition as assuming we're doing the second edition. Otherwise, we're spending a pretty large sum of money for something that's not addressing a space issue that we have organization-wide. So assuming that we do the addition, we will be bringing forward a revised contract with Ray and Osborne to fully design the second portion of it, and then taking that forward to bid, and then coming back to council for final approval of the bid once it goes out. The other option would be we stop. And instead, we look at a siting study for where we would possibly build a different city hall. That alone, Gray and Osborne, I spoke with them today, they're estimating 6 months to a year. Similar process was done in the fire department. And then it takes several years to design the documents, permit the documents. And then we would go through the same process of taking it to bid and coming back to City Hall. Ultimately, they estimate that it would be probably 2027 before we would see a new building.
So it'd be a lot more expensive.
So here's my 2 cents
We would need to find it.
on this, and I think we need to talk around this. You go back to page 1. In October 2022, the estimate was $1.5 million for edition 1. Then there was a revised cost estimate up about another $180,000 to $16,370. Went out to bid in May. The base bid was over the engineer's estimated cost by $100,000 plus, all the way up to $500,000. We, those of us on council at the time, voted to reject all bids and to wait to go back out to bid again. In the 2024 budget, it is budgeted for option 1, total cost 2.67 to 2.86. REIT budgeted is at the 2.67. We know that all these funds that are supported by the services provided by City Hall are contributing. This is fully funded in the 2024 budget. Option two, provided to us tonight, is rebuild City Hall right here. $5 to $6.5 million. Option three, purchase a new building someplace else. Same thing. Option four, construct a new building at a new location, same thing. The goal is to have a space that provides enough room for city staff, everybody under one roof, so we don't have Mr. and Mrs. Jones going to this building, then going down here to pay for this and going down here to do this. They can just go to one spot. What is the better value for the taxpayer than option one? Personally, I think we can go to option two down the road somehow with a project that would redo this building, and then maybe you get some residential up top. This is a prime spot, something down the road. Instead of having retail on the ground level, it would be, but that's a whole nother project. That's a whole nother thing. I mean, let's be practical. This is already paid for in this budget. And I personally don't, would I like a Taj Mahal? Sure. But I'm not, that's not my money. These are the taxpayers' money. And they expect services under one roof, and they would get that during option one. My 2 cents on this. Councilmember Green.
Let's say we went with option one, and then there's options A, B, and C within option one. So 1A, that's the 2.6 to 2.8. Is that the cost for option 1A?
1A, okay, so
Baseline.
the 2.6 would be no metal roof, no parking lot.
Okay,
The 2.8 would be metal roof and parking lot.
okay,
Neither of those include the newly revealed entryways,
yeah,
which would be an additional $100,000 to $400,000, depending on which design.
okay,
That's the initial estimate. We haven't actually done the design to get the actual bid
Okay.
or estimate docs. for
so the
that.
greenhouse then is like 100.
I'm not even sure that it would be that much,
Okay.
frankly. I don't, yeah, so
Okay,
it would be less than 4, significantly
Okay.
less, but yes.
okay, thanks.
Mhm.
I don't really mind the greenhouse look myself.
Mhm.
It would save $100,000 to $400,000. I mean, I like the look of it right now would be great. All of these are very nice looking, but if we want to save a few dollars, which I think that's also an important thing. I think that one looks pretty good with just our normal opening and stairs going up, but.
Councilmember Arson.
Well, I was just gonna say, in the bid market, we can have it, they call them addendums to the plan of where they give you options, your bid price, and then we actually could come back to council and say, okay, well, here's the numbers. You guys can pick the building this with addendum A and put them together, because right now, like, we bid to almost all the same bidders that are bidding this, and if we're not 10 to 20% below engineer's estimate right now, we're not even in the ballpark of the bids. That's how crazy tight like the bidding is right now. So I don't know, if I was gonna do it, I would definitely do the addendum, shoot for the moon with one and then have a lower option of what we can do, then it's like, hey, well, this is what will work for us. If nothing else. Cause it don't cost you nothing, right? To bid it.
Correct.
I was amazed at the difference in some of the prices.
Put your hand up.
Yes,
Councilmember Burbank.
I myself like option C. Only because I like that it makes City Hall look more like a city hall. Like right now, it's more identifiable as like a city hall than just, I do like the way it looks. Now, obviously, it's a historical building, but it makes it look more like that city hall. It's very, I mean, I know there'd be a sign, but I don't know. That's just I just like the look of that one better because it makes it more identifiable in my opinion, but That's
It's
just a,
it's the normal design of what you're seeing a lot of new buildings come out with, fire stations, city halls, it's all that.
yeah,
Same.
but
That's my only.
Mayor,
I guess, or go ahead, Connie,
No, I
before
was
I,
just gonna ask you, it doesn't
Sorry.
really say on here. On these, on A, B, or C, what is the actual, what would the square footage be for the buildings?
from 1,900 to 3,800, I believe.
Yeah.
Or
1,900 to 38 and some change on both.
The entryways.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
entryway, well, the greenhouse option does add about 20 square feet.
I just wanted to add that this is just from a 30,000 foot elevation, not getting into the nuts and bolts of City Hall itself, which we need to, and we're going to. The holistic approach of this is we're done, as far as my knowledge is, we're done with the fire station. That's good beyond build out or to build out of Buckley. This is the next stage, the next phase. We're gonna have more struggles and more problems coming because we're gonna, after City Hall's done, we're gonna address this building. The police department's pretty good. They might need a couple additions but I don't think that we're not looking at a new building or a second story or anything crazy like that. We're trying to live within our means. This is a huge step. This step hurts. This is a lot of money for City Hall, and planning, building will all be housed there. That will free up space here where we can do a temporary, I mean, it'll be somewhat long-term, but it'll be a temporary improvement here for the court, which is way overdue for lots of reasons, but for the court and the senior center and so on and so forth. So this is just one step of this program. I don't want to get lost just on City Hall. This is almost a foregone conclusion. We need to do something at City Hall. What that is, we'll decide, but this is just one step in many steps to come.
Councilmember Asano.
So in the 2.8 or whatever, was that also included for housing City Hall while they're remodeling? Or do we got to accrue that cost too?
So for Housing City Hall, we'll be doing a combination of moving some staff here to the fire station, one probably to Public Works and remote work. We will be, in order to make it work. We may, if remote work for some reason doesn't work out, then we may be looking to rent some space if we need to, but I think that we could make temporary use out of the fire station. They have some extra spaces. There's one down at PD. So we'll all be displaced for a little bit. And we'll be we would reopen the City Hall main counter here where planning and building is right now.
Lots of moving parts.
Mhm.
Yep. Any other comments or questions on this? Councilmember Ferguson.
Is the 2.8, is that including the second portion? Okay.
Yeah, both of those include the second portion.
Okay.
The only difference is the parking lot that was added, it was an alternate in the first round, and the metal roof versus composite shingle.
Which council asked for all the numbers for the.
So the
metal
roof
you
would,
weren't here, so it'd all be aesthetically the same.
so the roof would
We
all
made something
match.
together.
Right.
Yeah.
If we wanted that, we can do it on a budget though. We can certainly do it cheaper. Or have it done cheaper. We're not
Composition
doing-
roof though, that replace it every 25, 30 years. That's not cheap.
So we now at the point to where you want direction from council.
That would be great.
Yes, so I suggest. My suggestion, and this is up for comment, debate. That we direct. The administration to go out to bid. For. And I like your. Reference to the addendums. Because we have all three, we have A, B, and C. Go out to bid. So we can come back to us and then we can decide if we're gonna spend this money or not. Councilmember Song.
I just want everybody to make sure that we know if we give them direction to go for this, that there's a design cost for this, correct?
Yes,
We'll be coming back next week with that,
If we spent a couple $100,000 on this design already, right?
180,000.
180,000, and then we're gonna have to spend an additional 20,000 or whatever it
I
was.
think it's actually 80.
80,000 for them to design this, just so everybody knows what they're voting on. Or-
We're not voting,
No,
we're not
no,
voting at a study
no,
session.
No,
but-
no, no, I was meaning for next week if it comes up. That you're aware there's a design cost.
Yep.
That was it.
What fund does that come out of?
REIT, that's included, that
that's
two
included.
point six includes the design cost.
It does include it. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have that money to use.
Yes, we budgeted for it in the twenty
For
twenty-four.
financing or.
No, it's using the REIT dollars in 307, so the carryover REIT dollars, the $200,000 in additional REIT revenue we're expecting for this year. The cost allocation from the other utility funds and interest revenue. From REIT.
And when you estimate the REIT for this year, is it just based on properties that are for sale or what?
It's based on historical trends and a guesstimate of what's going on with the housing market kind of thing. We budgeted 2024's budget is lower than what we received in 23, just knowing that things were slowing down. And so to be conservative, didn't want to count on the same or more. So we could see a little bit of a drop off towards the end. And so we wanted to make sure we went lower this year than we did for 23.
Is that just on sales of property or is that part of sales of property tax as well?
Just, it's the tax that's on the sale of the property. Yep.
I'm sorry, I have so many questions.
No, it's
Yep.
okay.
So do we have consensus?
I agree with you.
Not seeing anything else, so I bring it forth next Tuesday.
Thank you, council.
Last item on the agenda, there is no supporting documentation. It is review of council committees. Oh, wait, the mayor has some
Got
documents.
a handout, something we can discuss. We'll go through this at the next study session about committees. As you know, it's ultimately my decision what those committees look like, and these are some suggestions. But of course, always open feedback and you. So, nothing we have to get into tonight, but if you'd like to discuss it, we certainly can. Thank you. With the change with Director Banks, it seems simple and common sense to adjust the committees a little bit because now Director Banks is over utilities and planning and building, so that would make sense. So he's not split. He can come to a committee meeting and cover all his bases. But that's not in concrete. We can certainly look at what your thoughts are, and we don't have to cover it tonight. We can hit it in the next, so you can digest this. There's just some options and ideas. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, so the one I was on, transportation, that would be the building too then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you explain more the council liaison? Like all of those meeting,
This is optional. This is,
Okay.
you'll see on the back page if you're not there yet. I've got it. We don't have the LTAC isn't formed yet. Oh,
There's a one
Oh.
pager.
never mind.
Yours included the extra.
There are only ones side got printed, sorry. So the council liaison, I have on here, we'll get you a copy of this. One or two council members appointed to each of these, like planning commission would be one, senior advisory commission, citizens advisory commission. If council members want to go to like a quarterly meeting for the committee meetings, this is completely up to you guys how you want to structure this. But if we want to get into that community outreach portion, as we've discussed, we just don't know what that should look like or if we're going to tackle that this year. But planning commission, senior advisory commission, citizens advisory commission and the economic development BDA chamber. If council members wanted to attend those meetings, in addition, we can condense the committee meetings to not have them every other week or so on and so forth. So just things to digest, and I'll get you a better printout of this.
Do you mayor want to temporarily appoint another person to admin finance and another person to transportation utilities. Until which time we go over this and come up with some ideas.
I think we can leave it as is, just for this first month. It is all on here, sorry.
You still have a quorum. There'd still be a quorum.
Correct. And I misspoke. It is on here. The PSRC, all this stuff is on this sheet. It's just, I have it on 2 pages. I was
Yes.
looking at the wrong one, sorry.
So the idea with the council liaison would be that there would be like 2 council members that would split up going to all of those different meetings?
No, there'd be.
I'm
council
really
members-
trying to wrap my head, I'm not sure what.
The way that it works in other cities is if we held the standing committees less frequently, so every other month or once a quarter instead of monthly, on those months that you had off from your standing committee meeting, you would attend one of these other liaison groups. So similar to what Councilmember Green does right now with PSRC, you would attend one of the other groups' meetings, and then you would come and report back to council on the activities that are happening with those other groups.
Okay.
So the reason, this has been requested by BDA and Chamber at different public meetings.
Okay.
It is something that our neighbors over in Enumclaw and Bonnie Lake do,
Okay.
where council members are appointed as liaison, and we do 1 or 2 to ensure that there isn't a quorum meeting at somebody else's meeting, and then can receive that information and report back to council. I think it makes sense for the economic development side here because we don't have an economic development department. We partner with the chamber and BDA for that work, so having some additional involvement there makes sense. And then for our citizens advisory commissions that we have today, so Planning Commission, Citizens Advisory Commission, and Senior Advisory Commission, and LTAC once it's formed. When they come before the city council, you all are somewhat, well, at least 1 or 2 of you are aware of the work that's been going on.
Okay,
And all of council is more so briefed. And so there, it feels like there's a bit more of a partnership.
okay.
I would suggest that all of us here review these council liaison opportunities, and what I heard the city administrator say is these other committees may not necessarily meet every month. They may meet once a quarter, every 2 months, whatever. And it's listed down here. If you could kind of figure out which one of those commissions that you would like to be a liaison for, when we come back together, you could notify the mayor, and then the mayor, can assign. I mean, I think it's a great idea that we have an idea what's going on. We can come back, committee reports. Well, liaison report. This is what's going on there. This is how we can support this. Or
And the one thing that's not on there is the LTAC, which we haven't formed, which is lodging.
Tax Advisory.
Yeah.
Commission.
Yeah,
We're
so that
still trying.
our generous hotel industry, we need to have an LTAC, so we're forming that as well. But Kenny, did you have something?
I was just gonna say the only one I couldn't do was the 10 a.m. one, the senior advisory board. Other than that,
I
I
could do
could.
that one.
It's a fun meeting.
I'd like that.
So,
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
well, yeah, that would fit perfectly with Denise.
Yep.
Perfectly.
I got
Well,
it.
maybe not. Maybe she's walking the trail at 10 a.m. and can't make it.
I walk the trail all different times, so 10 a.m. would.
Midnight.
That's the one I would like. Looking at.
Okay.
so in not having the other committees meetings every month, is there not a need to have them every month, or would the
I-
meetings be longer? I'm just trying
Yeah.
to.
I think
Gauge.
that over the last year, what I've observed is that oftentimes we're just preempting what's discussed either the following night or a couple of days before
Okay.
at council as a group. What this would require, and what we've already started to create with like the council schedule, we're
Mhm.
planning things out as far in advance as we can, is just some more forward planning and earlier involvement from council, because we'd be presenting every other month or on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
I think that the committees, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was told the committees did used to meet every other month or less frequently than monthly. And we have canceled a fair share of committee meetings. So it would just create a bit more, I think, importance for those ones that are held. And we would, on staff side, make sure that we were presenting a quarter or 2 months worth of information for council at those meetings. And if we needed another one, we would request it.
Okay.
And yes, they would be longer, of
They-
course.
Well, then,
Yeah.
when we get into budget,
Yeah.
that season, you're gonna have one every month. I
Right.
mean, it's just depending.
we were trying to craft a way for us to do a council liaison without adding a bunch of meetings to
Okay.
everybody's calendar. So in those off months would be when you would have, in theory, the time and availability to attend those other meetings.
And if it falls apart or we just seem like it's too much or it's not working like we'd like, we can adjust it. It won't be in concrete. We'll try it and see how it works. I mean, we'll try it for the whole year, hopefully, but if something falls apart in the middle, then we'll go back and, oh, we need to have this extra meeting and we'll adjust.
I like it. Councilmember Rossano.
So if you did like economic development, would one person do the chamber and the BDA, or would you split it, or how's that work?
The chamber and BDA meetings are held at different times.
Yeah, it's-
Quarterly. And so I would recommend doing two. And so some people might have overlaps where you have a primary and an alternate, if you will. And then that's up to you, how you are able to structure your time. Maybe it's you go to both, or you go to those organizations and say which meetings make the most sense for us to attend. This is our goal. I have reached out to Chamber and BDA. They're both really excited about the possibility. They'd be happy to have some space in their program for council to be involved if you wanted to do some type of an update back and forth. But those are the two that fall under economic development. So I grouped them together.
I was just, yeah.
Yeah, one could be a primary on BDA and the other vice versa. And then you're both at those meetings, but
I'm
that
trying.
way one person's covering
I can't
it,
do that.
the
Yeah.
update to the council or whatnot.
Is it?
Anything else from council on this document that we'll address later? Just think about it. Yeah, and then we'll
Yeah, we'll hit it next study session.
next study session. Anything else? Council comments? I would say Happy New Year. I would not say happy winter because it's not winter. It is, well, it is winter, but it's weird weather. So anything else from council?
I just had a question about the street sweeper.
Yeah,
Do we not, that's our only one, correct?
that is our only
So
one.
Is there gonna be any plan
Yeah.
for like or is it, we're just not gonna have any street sweeping until we get a new one?
We've
or-
contracted for now. So
Oh,
right now we have a
okay.
contract going. So work is still occurring.
Okay.
And we
contracted,
are
okay.
looking at options to replace that street sweeper, new and used.
Okay.
Now you got more. Did we look into seeing what was better, contracting or renting one and still having our guy run it?
Oh,
I do not have the person here who can answer that question.
I know it's not inexpensive to have it done, so we want
Yeah.
to, yeah.
I
we
pay
wanna-
$265 an hour. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I don't know
Right.
the contract.
Is
number.
Chris here?
Yeah.
Oh,
is the schedule still the same of who we're contracting with of when they're doing it, or has that changed? Like, I
I'm
just.
not sure, but I can get you that information if Chris isn't able to tune
Hey,
in.
can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear him very faintly.
Just barely.
How about now?
I just-
Hello?
It's all.
Yeah, it's, yeah,
Yeah, I can follow up an email.
okay,
We'll be bringing it forward soon with some options to replace the
okay.
equipment. I know the team's already working on it.
Anything else? Councilmember Green.
Go Huskies.
Yep, no dollars.
Okay, 7:34 on the 2nd of January, 2024 ends the Buckley City Council study session.
You know, like, he's got. One day, probably have to keep it around 1 day versus, you know, you're in a sweeper for a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, probably more.
I'm trying to look at like, because I'm trying to look at when all these ones meet, like based on when I have staff meetings, because our staff meetings are on Tuesdays. Sometimes I'm coming from a staff meeting